My best friend and my girlfriend betrayed me in my own home. I disappeared for 5 years. But when I announced my engagement, she came back with a devastating secret. I have a son I never knew existed, and I sued them for stealing 5 years from me. I'm 34 years old. I work in digital marketing, and 5 months ago I found out I have a 5-year-old son I never knew existed. Yeah, you read that right. 5 years. And no, it's not like they hid him from me by accident or because we lost touch naturally. No, this was completely intentional and twisted. And the story of how I got to this point is so messed up that sometimes I can't even believe it myself when I think about it. But here goes, because I need to get this all out, and maybe someone reading this will understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, or at least why I feel what I feel. I guess I should start like 6 years ago, when I was 29 and living in an apartment with my best friend, Scott. And when I say best friend, I mean the guy I grew up with, went to college with, shared literally everything with since we were like 12 years old. We were inseparable, you know, that level of friendship where you don't even need to talk to understand each other. At that time, I was dating Heather. We'd been together for like 2 years, and honestly, I thought we were serious. Like I could see myself marrying her eventually. She basically lived with me, though officially she had her own place, but she'd spend like 5 nights a week at our apartment. Scott and her got along well, or so I thought. Normal because he was my best friend and she was my girlfriend. Obviously, they were going to interact. Everything seemed to be going fine, like normal late 20s life, working, going out on weekends with our friend group, planning a future. Heather worked at a boutique, and I had just gotten a decent job at an agency. Scott was finishing grad school. Everything very stable, I guess. There were no major problems, no dramatic fights, nothing that made me think something was wrong. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. There were little things that didn't quite add up, like how Heather would sometimes stay at the apartment when I left early for work and Scott didn't have classes until later. Or how sometimes I'd see them talking quietly and they'd stop when I entered the room. But I was a trusting idiot who thought those things were normal because we were all friends. You know what I mean? Then one day, I was at work. It was like a random Wednesday in March, and I get a message from Craig, another friend from the group, basically saying, "I need to talk to you. It's important." I tell him I'm busy, but I'll call him in the afternoon, and he insists, "No, it has to be now. It's about Heather." Obviously, I get worried, thinking maybe something happened to her or she's in trouble, so I step out of the office and call him. Craig sounds nervous, like really uncomfortable, and he tells me, "Look, man, I don't know how to tell you this, but you need to see something," and he sends me a screenshot. I open the screenshot, and it's a conversation between Heather and a friend of hers, where Heather is describing in explicit detail what she did with Scott the night before, laughing about how I had no idea, saying things like, "He's so easy to fool," and basically making fun of me while recounting how they'd been sleeping together behind my back for months. I can't describe what I felt in that moment. It was like the floor had opened up beneath me. You know, that feeling where your whole body goes cold and hot at the same time and you feel like you're going to throw up but you also can't move. I stood there in the middle of the street reading and rereading that screenshot, looking for some way it wasn't real, that it was a misunderstanding or a bad joke, but there was no way to misinterpret it. It was explicit. It was detailed. And worst of all, I could hear Heather's voice in those messages, the way she wrote, the words she used. It was her, without a doubt. I called work saying I had a family emergency and drove home like a madman. I don't even know how I got there because I was on autopilot, hands shaking on the steering wheel, mind racing, trying to process what I was going to do, what I was going to say. I got to the apartment around 2 in the afternoon. Heather was there because she had the day off, and Scott should have been at the university, but his car was in the parking lot. I went in with my keys, trying not to make noise. I don't know why. I guess part of me still had that stupid hope that Craig had made a mistake or the screenshot was fake, and I went up the stairs toward the bedrooms. Scott's door was slightly open. I heard them before I saw them, and that was enough to confirm everything. I pushed the door open, and there they were, in Scott's bed, my best friend and my girlfriend, and the expression on their faces when they saw me was almost comical if it hadn't been so devastating. Heather screamed and tried to cover herself. Scott just froze like an idiot, and I just stood there, I think for like 30 seconds, unable to process what I was seeing, even though I already knew they were going to be there. Finally, all I could say was, "You have 1 hour to get your stuff and get out of my apartment," and I turned around and went to my room. Heather came after me, putting on a robe, crying, saying, wait, I can explain." And I told her, "There's nothing to explain. I saw the screenshot. I know you've been doing this for months. I just want you to leave." She started with the classic excuses. Like it was a mistake. It doesn't mean anything. I love you. And I just kept repeating, "I want you to leave. I want you to leave." Because if I kept talking to her, I was going to say things I'd regret, or worse, I was going to cry in front of her, and that wasn't going to happen. Scott didn't even have the courage to come out of his room. He stayed in there hiding like the coward he was. I spent that hour locked in my room listening to them move around the apartment, packing things, Heather sobbing and trying to knock on my door to talk, Scott mumbling apologies that meant nothing. When they finally left, I came out and the apartment felt huge and empty, and I just sat on the couch and stayed there staring at the wall for I don't know how long. I called my sister Angela that night, told her everything, and she told me to get out of there, that place was contaminated with horrible memories, and I needed to start fresh. She was right. Over the next 2 weeks, I cut contact with absolutely everyone from the friend group. I changed my number, deleted all my social media, blocked Heather and Scott everywhere, and moved back to my home state where my family lived. It was drastic, I know, but I couldn't stay there. Every time I saw the apartment, I thought about the two of them. Every time I went out, I thought I was going to run into them. And our friend group was divided between those who knew and didn't tell me anything, which made me just as angry, and those who didn't know and now had to pick sides. I didn't want to deal with any of that. I just wanted to disappear and rebuild my life from scratch, and that's exactly what I did. The first few months were horrible. I'm not going to lie. I spent all my time wondering what I'd done wrong, why I hadn't noticed, how I could have been so blind. I thought about all the times I was at work while they were together in my apartment, in my space, probably laughing at me. It was my sister who basically forced me to go to therapy, and that helped, slowly. I got a new job at a digital marketing company, made new friends, started dating again, though without any desire for anything serious. The truth is, I didn't trust anyone romantically. You know, after your best friend and your girlfriend betray you like that, it's hard to believe someone else won't do the same to you. But then, like 2 years after all that shit, I met Victoria at a company networking event. She worked in graphic design for another company. She was smart, funny, and there was something about her that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt since before the Heather thing. There wasn't love at first sight or anything dramatic. It was more like a gradual connection that grew over time. We started dating. We took things slow because I was still an emotional mess. But she was patient. I told her everything about Heather and Scott eventually, and she didn't judge me or make drama. She just listened and supported me. Fast forward to like 6 months ago. By then, we'd been together for 3 years. We were living together, and I finally felt like a whole person again, like I had left all that shit from the past behind. I proposed to Victoria on a trip we took to the beach. She said yes, and obviously we were excited. We decided to make the engagement official on social media. He had recreated profiles like a year before, just with new people and family, and Victoria posted a picture of us with the ring, all very normal and happy. 2 days later, the messages started. Heather wrote me on Instagram, on Facebook, everywhere. The messages said things like, "I need to talk. To you. It's urgent," or "Please don't ignore me. It's important." I blocked her immediately on all platforms without even reading the full messages. I didn't even feel curious. To me, that woman was part of a past I had buried long ago, and I had no interest in reviving any of that. Victoria saw the messages before I blocked them and asked if she should be worried. I told her no, that Heather was probably bored or jealous or whatever, but that I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of responding. But Heather didn't stop. She started creating fake profiles, new accounts, and trying to contact me through those. Some were obvious, others not so much until she wrote her first message. She also wrote to Victoria, telling her, "You need to tell James to contact me. It's about something that happened years ago, and he needs to know." Victoria showed me the messages and I kept blocking her, like I was starting to consider reporting her or something because she was getting stalkerish. I didn't understand what part of "I don't want to talk to you" wasn't clear. Then one afternoon, like 3 weeks after all this, I get a call from Angela, my sister. I answered, expecting a normal conversation, and she sounded weird, like nervous, and she tells me, "You need to sit down for this." I tell her I'm already sitting. "What's going on?" And she drops it. "Heather contacted me." She says, "You have a son." I went blank. Literally, my brain didn't process the words for a few seconds. I told Angela to repeat what she'd just said, thinking I'd heard wrong, and she repeated, "Heather says you have a son with her, a 5-year-old boy, and you need to know." I started laughing because it was obviously ridiculous, like a desperate lie to get my attention, and I told Angela that Heather was crazy and obviously making things up. But Angela said Heather had sent her photos of the boy, and that according to her, the resemblance was undeniable. That night, I didn't sleep. Victoria asked me what was wrong, and I told her, and she had the same reaction I did, that it was obviously manipulation or a lie, but there was a part of me, a small annoying part, that kept thinking, what if it's true? What if there really is a kid? The timeline fit. Like if the kid was 5 years old, he would have been conceived right before I discovered the affair, when Heather and I were still together. But that would mean she hid a pregnancy, a birth, 5 years of a child's life from me, and that was so monstrous I couldn't even process it. I decided to handle this in the most professional way possible. I hired a lawyer, explained the situation, and he contacted Heather on my behalf, saying that if she wanted to talk about something legal, she had to do it through him and needed to present real evidence, not just words. I also made it clear that I wasn't going to communicate directly with her, under any circumstances. The lawyer was firm, like he told her this was serious, and if she was lying, there could be legal consequences. A week later, the lawyer called me and said Heather had sent documentation, photos of the boy, the birth certificate, where the father listed was Scott, which was already weird, and more photos from when he was a baby. He sent me the photos by email, and when I opened them, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The boy, Benjamin, according to the certificate, was identical to me as a kid. He had the same eyebrows, the same face shape, even the same expression in some photos. My mom had pictures of me as a child, and it was like seeing the same images but from a different era. Victoria saw it and her face said it all. She saw the resemblance immediately too. I demanded a paternity test. I told my lawyer I wasn't going to accept anything until I had scientific confirmation, because as much as the kid looked like me, I needed to be absolutely sure. Heather agreed to do the test, and during the 2 weeks it took to wait for the results, I was a mess. I couldn't concentrate at work. I couldn't sleep well. Victoria tried to support me, but I was on another planet. I kept thinking about all the implications, like if the kid was mine, that meant I'd lost 5 years of his life, that there was a little human being in the world who was my son, and I didn't know him, that I'd been robbed of the opportunity to be a father from the beginning. The results came and confirmed what I already suspected. The boy was biologically mine, with 99.9% certainty. I sat there with the paper in my hands and cried like I hadn't cried in years, maybe since I discovered the affair. But this time it was different. It wasn't just betrayal and pain. It was also rage and a kind of grief for everything I'd lost. 5 years. 5 birthdays, first words, first steps, everything. And it hadn't even been my decision not to be there. They'd completely taken that choice away from me. My lawyer investigated further, and it turned out Scott is sterile. He has some medical condition that makes it impossible for him to have biological children. Apparently, they discovered this recently when they tried to have a second child and couldn't. They went to get tested, and that's when everything came out. That's why Heather was now desperate to contact me, because I guess they needed money to raise Benjamin, or because Scott no longer wanted to be in that situation knowing the kid wasn't his biologically. Who knows what their twisted reasoning was? Honestly, I didn't care. The only thing I cared about was that I had a son who had been living, believing Scott was his father, and I needed to meet him. I needed to be part of his life. I told my lawyer to demand visitation rights and that I was willing to pay child support as appropriate, but that I wasn't going to settle for just sending money and disappearing. That boy was mine, and I had a right to know him, and for him to know me. That's when the real legal battle began. Because it turns out that Scott, despite not being the biological father, was listed as the father on the birth certificate and had acted as a father for 5 years. So legally he had rights too, and he wasn't willing to share the child with me. My lawyer explained to me that this was going to be complicated, that it wasn't as simple as paternity test equals automatic rights, that we had to consider the child's well-being and a whole series of complex legal factors. We had to have an in-person meeting, the 4 of us, Heather, Scott, my lawyer, and me. It was at my lawyer's office, a cold and formal conference room, and it was the first time I'd seen Heather and Scott in over 5 years. Heather looked older, obviously, more tired, but there was also something of desperation in her eyes that wasn't there before. Scott looked uncomfortable and angry. He wouldn't look at me directly. I didn't want to look at them either, but we had to be there to try to reach some agreement. My lawyer started by explaining my position. I wanted regular scheduled visitation rights. I was willing to pay full child support, and eventually when Benjamin was old enough, I wanted him to know I was his biological father. Scott exploded at that point, saying I wasn't the father of anything, that he had raised that kid since he was born, that he changed his diapers while I was God knows where, and that he wasn't going to let me show up and ruin his family. I told him his family was built on a lie, and that if he really cared about the kid, he'd let him have access to his biological father, but that just made him angrier. Heather tried to mediate, proposing that maybe we could do small visits, like once every 2 months, without Benjamin knowing who I really was, just as a family friend or something. I told her absolutely not, that I wasn't going to be a secret or a stranger in my own son's life, that either they gave me real and honest access, or we'd see each other in court. It was a horrible meeting that ended without any agreement, everyone furious and frustrated. Scott called me directly a few days later, ignoring the protocol that everything should go through the lawyers. He told me to think about Benjamin, that the kid was happy, that he had a stable family, and that me showing up now would only confuse and hurt him. He told me that if I really loved my son, ironic coming from him, I should leave him alone. I replied that he had no moral authority to tell me anything, that he had helped rob me of 5 years with my son, and that I was going to fight for my rights no matter how much time or money it took me. The next few months were exhausting. Court dates, mediations, psychological evaluations, interviews with social workers. Victoria supported me through everything, even offered to postpone the wedding so I could focus on this, but I told her no, that the wedding was going ahead because she was my future, and this mess with Heather and Scott wasn't going to take that away from us. I spent so much time and money on lawyers, I lost count, but I didn't care. This was for my son. Finally, after what felt like forever, but was like 4 months of legal battles, we reached an agreement. I would have supervised visits initially, twice a month for 4 hours each time, with supervision gradually decreasing if the visits went well. I would also have the right to call Benjamin once a week. In exchange, I would pay full and contributory child support, plus a portion of medical and educational expenses. It wasn't perfect. I wanted more time, but my lawyer told me it was the best we could get without going to full trial, which could take years and didn't guarantee a better outcome. The first meeting with Benjamin was at a public park, with a social worker present. Heather and Scott were also there, but in a different area of the park, where they could see us but not hear us. I was terrified, like my hands were sweating and I felt like my heart was going to explode. What do you say to a 5-year-old boy who is your son but doesn't know you exist? How do you start a relationship that should have begun the moment he was born? Benjamin was small for his age, shy at first, hiding behind the social worker. He had my hair, my eyes. It was like seeing myself in miniature version, and that destroyed me internally. I spoke to him softly, told him my name was James, and that I'd like to get to know him if he wanted to. I brought some toys as the social worker suggested, a little car and some dinosaurs, and that helped break the ice. Eventually he started playing and talking to me, told me about his school, about his favorite TV show, 5-year-old kid stuff that was simultaneously mundane and the most important thing I'd ever heard. Those 4 hours went by too fast. When it was time to end, Benjamin asked me if I was coming back, and I told him, yes, that we'd see each other very soon. Heather came to pick him up, and the look she gave me was hard to read. There was something of guilt there, maybe, or regret, but I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was that I'd met my son, and I was going to keep getting to know him. The visits continued, every 2 weeks, and little by little Benjamin opened up more with me. He started looking forward to them with excitement, according to what the social worker told me. He'd ask when I was coming again. He'd make me drawings that Heather had to email me. After 3 months, the supervision was reduced to the social worker only being present at the beginning and end of visits, and after 6 months, we could have visits without supervision, just him and me, though still in public places and for limited time. Scott eventually backed off a bit from the situation, or so it seems. Heather is the one who now handles all the logistics of the visits and who communicates with my lawyer. I don't know what's going on in their house or what they tell Benjamin about me, if he knows I'm his biological father or if he thinks I'm just a special family friend. That's something we'll have to address eventually, but for now we're leaving on pause so as not to confuse the kid more. The wedding with Victoria is scheduled for 3 months from now. Benjamin is going to be there. Not as part of the ceremony because that would be too soon and complicated, but he'll be at the reception, and we've already explained to him that Victoria and I are getting married, and that he's very important to us. Victoria has been incredible with all this. She's met Benjamin at some of the recent visits and they get along well. She's patient and caring with him in a way that makes me love her even more. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect, or that I'm over the rage of having 5 years with my son stolen from me. There are still days where I think about everything I missed and it infuriates me. Where I want to scream at Heather for how monstrous it was to hide this from me. Where I want Scott to suffer for getting involved in something that destroyed so much. But there are also days where Benjamin tells me he likes me, or where he asks if we can go somewhere specific next time, and I forget all the bad stuff, because I'm building something new with him. Something that's just ours and that no one can take away from me. Last month we had a visit at a science museum, and Benjamin was fascinated with everything, jumping from exhibit to exhibit, asking me 1,000 questions. At one point he took my hand to show me something about dinosaurs. A gesture so casual and natural for him, but for me it was huge. Like I felt that all the legal battle and pain had been worth it in that second. When I dropped him back off with Heather that afternoon, he hugged me and said, "See you soon, James." And I told him, "Yes, see you soon." I don't know what the future is going to be like, if Benjamin will ever call me Dad or if I'll always be James, if we'll ever have a real father-son relationship or if I'll always be in this gray zone of secondary father figure. I don't know if Heather and Scott will eventually accept my role in Benjamin's life, or if it'll always be a constant battle. But what I do know is that I'm going to be there for my son in every way I can, that I'm going to keep fighting for more time with him, and that I'm never going to let them take me away from him again. Because he's my son, and I lost 5 years, but I'm not going to lose another day.